Come in, traveler. The fire is warm, the night is long, and this tale is not a short one. So take your seat, rest your bones, and listen close. Tonight we begin Nerfed Life. Act 1.
Chapter 1. Rodney's phone alarm screamed like a dying mech suit dropped down an elevator shaft. "Wake up, you slime." The custom text blinked across the cracked screen, bright enough to stab the back of his retinas, like a laser from some bargain bin anime villain. Rodney groaned, peeled a lone sock off his chest, and blinked into the dim cave he called an apartment. The air smelled faintly of dust, old soy packets, and whatever the hell had crawled into his laundry basket to die. Shadows clung to the corners, piles of clothes, gaming merch, and forgotten projects merging together into a topography of chaos. This place wasn't a home. It was a bunker built out of procrastination. He stretched, vertebrae popping, and rolled to a sitting position on his battered futon couch hybrid. It sagged beneath him like it regretted every life choice that led to becoming his bed. "Live and learn," he muttered to himself. "You get what you pay for, right?" Empty ramen cups stood sentinel around him, leaning towers of MSG and regret. A half-built anime figure, a cat girl with one missing arm, lay face down on the desk like she'd given up on him too. His gaming chair wobbled whenever the fridge rattled awake, threatening collapse with every creaky shift of weight. He rubbed his face with both hands, dragging the exhaustion down his cheeks. Another day, another shift, another morning pretending his life wasn't slowly collapsing under the weight of apathy. He shuffled to the kitchen, corner, which was really just 3 steps from his bed, and cracked open a warm energy drink. The hiss sounded like a disappointed sigh. Breakfast. Acquired. Being a stocking specialist at a tiny convenience store wasn't a dream, or a goal, or even something he intentionally chose. He just ended up there, like driftwood washing onto a random shore. The fluorescent lights, the same 4 regulars, the mindless routine of facing bottles until they lined up like obedient soldiers. It all blurred into a beige loop of existence. The world outside his apartment felt equally washed out. A city that wasn't dangerous, but wasn't alive either. Buildings with faded paint. Traffic lights that flickered like they were tired too. Grey skies that always seemed like they were thinking about raining, but couldn't fully commit. On lunch break, Rodney sat in his car, chewing a sandwich that tasted like despair and disappointment. The plastic seat stuck to the back of his thighs. The gacha game on his phone taunted him with bright colors and waifu characters designed to siphon the joy from his wallet. Still, he played. Still, he cursed the developers. Still, he refused to uninstall. Evenings were his time to shine, if glowing faintly like radioactive sludge counted as shining. Back at his PC, drenched in RGB ambience that made the room feel like a nightclub for socially awkward electronics, Rodney studied his anime watch list with the grave seriousness of a war general. The usual suspects. Slime reincarnation, hero of the bunny-made kingdom. That time I was reborn as the demon lord's bath towel. And at the bottom, the cursed one. A title so obscene the streaming service censored half of it with a blurry patch when you hovered over it. A title that promised both shame and delight. Rodney hovered anyway. He always did. A guilty grin tugged at his mouth as he slurped ramen, letting the salt and nostalgia warm him more than his busted heater could. He typed comments online like a scholar defending a dissertation on terrible life choices. Between arguing about raid mechanics and dunking on strangers about patch balance, he slowly sank lower in his chair. Sometime around episode 6, his forehead met the keyboard with a soft thunk. His final online post melted into gibberish. "Last time I took on that boss, I one-shot him. Your gear must be trash. Wake up, you slime." Rodney slapped at the phone until silence obeyed. His head pulsed with the dull ache of too much screen time and not enough sleep. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling a long, stale ramen-scented breath that tasted like defeat. His apartment wasn't a mess. It was a museum exhibit called "A Young Man Fails to Thrive." Game cases lined the walls like faded trophies. Tangled cords formed nests. Half-finished projects waited like abandoned quests he no longer had the motivation to complete. He cracked open another warm energy drink, because cold ones required foresight, and microwaved a burrito he'd meant to eat last week. Probably. Maybe. His phone lit up. Mum. Missed call. 2. Mom. Missed call. 1. A gut punch of guilt, quick and sharp. He shoved it aside. He'd deal with it later. Then his phone buzzed again. Not Mum. His brother. Rodney froze, thumb hovering over the screen. He almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. He answered. Hey, dude. His brother's voice was tired, heavy, like someone carrying a burden for too long. Mom wants you home. She's worried about you. Rodney started to pace the cramped apartment, stepping over clothes and stepping around the truth. I can't today. I've got work and the bus is late and… Rodney. Just his name. The way only family could say it. Flat, knowing, disappointed but still trying. We both know you're not coming. Just say it. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was suffocating. Thick with everything he didn't want to admit. Look, I'll try this weekend, okay? You said that last month. A slow breath, frayed at the edges. And the one before that. Rodney swallowed, throat tight. You don't have to keep running from us. I'm not. But he was. They both knew it. His brother didn't yell, didn't guilt him. He just sounded tired. The kind of tired that came from caring too much for someone who only ever pushed you away. Call her when you're ready to stop lying to yourself. Click. The empty call hung in the air like cigarette smoke. Rodney stared at the screen until it dimmed. His chest tightened with a pressure he never let himself sit with. He grabbed his jacket and stepped outside. Morning assaulted him, cold air stinging his skin, sunlight too sharp after the safety of his neon cave. The city bustled with just enough life to remind him he wasn't part of it. People walked with purpose. Dogs barked. Cars passed by with drivers who probably had places to be and reasons to get up in the morning. Rodney kept his head down, eyes tracking sidewalk cracks like they were a map. He wasn't a bad guy. He wasn't. He just didn't know how to show up anymore. Not for family. Not for friends. Not even for himself. Online, though, he was unstoppable. A digital legend. A menace to forums everywhere. Get good. Imagine dying to that boss, LOL. It's just skill issue. I got him first try, BTW. He deployed sarcasm like a weapon, built walls out of memes, hid behind avatars and profile pictures. He pretended confidence he didn't have. He pretended strength he didn't feel. He pretended he wasn't lonely. He pretended a lot of things. Which is why he didn't see the truck. Not until… Rodney looked up, heart freezing, and saw the front grille of an Isuzu barreling toward him. The unofficial herald of Isekai protagonists everywhere. He had just enough time for one thought. Finally over. A small, almost peaceful smile tugged at his lips. A radiant flash of light swallowed everything. The impact snapped through him like a divine smite, folding him forward with bone-crunching force. Pain bloomed white-hot, and then… it was gone just as quickly. Then… nothing. Rodney's vision fractured into ribbons of white and gold, stretching across infinity like taffy pulled thin by the impatient hands of the cosmos. He felt himself spinning. No, tumbling. No, dissolving. As if his consciousness was being dragged through a funnel far too narrow for anything calling itself a person to reasonably fit inside. There was no breath, no heartbeat, just sensation, raw, electric, overwhelming. Every part of him, every memory, obsession, regret, fantasy, every late-night anime binge and half-hearted attempt at self-improvement flashed through him like strobing images projected inside a collapsing star. Some came bright and sharp, others smeared like wet paint under a storm. Then the light constricted, snapped, and reality collided with him with all the grace of a dropped hard drive. Rodney wasn't sure he was standing so much as being held in place by something unseen. His feet, if he still had feet, rested upon a vast plain of ivory marble. The surface wasn't cold, or warm, or neutral. It simply existed with intention, as if the floor knew he was here, recognized him, and tolerated his presence with the weary patience of an ancient librarian. Above stretched a sky that made no earthly sense. Not black, more like a deep cosmic violet where light swam instead of shone. Constellations shimmered and drifted like living things, stars rearranging themselves whenever he tried to draw meaning from them. Some formed shapes that felt familiar, then dissolved the moment comprehension approached. A celestial tease. For the first time in his life, maybe the first time ever, Rodney felt awe that wasn't forced, performative, or triggered by animated women with improbable anatomy. And then, she appeared. No flash of light, no dramatic explosion. She simply was, the way a sunrise doesn't arrive, but reveals itself. A goddess. She hovered several inches above the marble, as though gravity itself bowed to her presence. Black wavy hair drifted behind her like ink suspended in water, strands catching glimmers of starlight, tiny galaxies trapped in soft curls. Her cream-colored skin held a gentle radiance that didn't glare or overpower. It glowed with a purity that felt ancient and untouched. Her robes flowed in perfect balance between celestial and inviting, white and soft, with purple embroidery along the edges that shimmered faintly with enchantment. The fabric moved as if underwater, each ripple controlled by something more graceful than wind. The neckline dipped. Not indecently, but enough. Enough to derail Rodney's ability to perform basic mental arithmetic. His mind tried to form a coherent thought. Instead, it crashed. But her eyes, those were beyond mortal lust. Deep violet, alive, swirling like twin nebulas caught mid-birth, looking not at him, but through him, like she was reading everything he ever was at once. Her voice drifted forth, gentle and melodic, like a bell rung underwater. Rodney Hunter. He blinked. Yeah? Present? Her expression did not change. Serene, calm, almost kind. There was no irritation yet, just the careful, patient look of a teacher who already knew this student was going to be exhausting. "You arrived unexpectedly," she murmured as she drifted closer. "Your soul crossed over faster than most. I have not reviewed your history yet." Rodney's heart, his figurative one, leapt with stupid, reckless hope. This was it. The dream. The Isekai starter pack. Hot goddess? Check. Mysterious afterlife? Check. Possibility of cheat powers? Double check. He tried to straighten himself despite lacking a body. Then her gaze deepened, threading through his spirit like gentle fingers pulling apart tangled string. She sifted through what he was, what he pretended to be, and what he wanted to forget. "I see. Small acts of care," she murmured. "You helped your little brother. Patient, persistent. Even when your mother struggled, you tried to make her proud." Rodney's chest tightened. He hadn't expected that. Not this soon. Not ever. He remembered yesterday's call, awkward, rushed, him not knowing what to say to the man who still tried to reach out to him after everything. Her expression softened. Not pity, something deeper. "And your father, his passing. You carry more grief than you admit. The wound is old, the ache still fresh. His throat constricted. He couldn't speak. She was seeing too much. How he tried, how he failed, how he never let himself cry because someone had to stay strong. Rodney lowered his head. The marble beneath him rippled faintly. Then, the shift, the snap, the sympathy vanished. "Now," she said, tone flattening, "let us review your internet history." Rodney froze. His soul shriveled. Hope died quickly. Her expression moved from curiosity to confusion to disbelief to a weary, cosmic migraine. "What," she asked carefully, "is a bunny-made kingdom? And why have you watched it for 300 hours? Rodney made a sound between a cough and a whimper. I was just re-watching it a few times. And this forum account," she scrolled deeper. "Is this truly how you spend your nights? Arguing about patch notes? Calling strangers skill-issue peasants? Claiming you one-shot the boss on your first try?" Rodney wanted to fold into nothing. Then her eyes stopped, widened. Oh my. 2 tiny words, utterly terrifying. "Rodney," she whispered, voice trembling. "Why is 74% of your browser history—" "Don't say it." She said it anyway. "Animated adult content." Silence, the kind that follows a public execution of dignity. "This is concerning," she said at last. "Truly revolting." "Oh, lost one," she sighed. "I have the perfect place to send you." Cold swallowed him. Weightless. Endless. For the first time since dying, Rodney realized he was cosmically screwed. "So, hey," he said quickly, raising a finger like he was ordering a drink under threat. "Before you send me anywhere, do I get any skills? A stat screen? Cheat powers? You know, standard starter pack." She didn't look at him, not even slightly. He tried again. "Okay, thinking. Very normal. I'll just stand here." Silence. Worse silence. The stars dimmed above them, as if embarrassed. "Maybe a small perk?" Rodney pressed. "A harem thing? Tasteful. Modest. Maybe elves." Everything stopped. She drifted toward him until her face hovered inches from his. "You want what?" "Just a small harem, reasonable size." Her expression collapsed into pure, exhausted defeat. "Lost one," she said softly. "I have reviewed your history, in detail." She exhaled. Galaxies shuddered. "You will never be entrusted with a harem." Rodney's mouth opened. She straightened, smoothing her robes, professional once more. "But do not worry," she said crisply. "Your skills and blessings have been assigned. Everything is sorted." His eyes lit up. "Really? Wait, what did you give?" Before Rodney could protest, the portal surged beneath him, a lung-crushing pull of violet gravity and divine pressure that wrapped around his ankles and yanked. His stomach shot into his throat. His vision stuttered between starlight and black void, between infinite distance and suffocating closeness, as though reality itself couldn't decide whether to tear him apart or fold him inward. The sensation wasn't falling. It wasn't flying. It was being taken. Instinct took over. He didn't think. He didn't choose. He just screamed and grabbed the nearest thing that wasn't purple cosmic death. Veyra's sleeves. He latched on like a drowning man finding the last branch on earth, fingers locking around embroidered divinity with the blind strength of someone who had already decided that letting go meant dying. The goddess made a sound no holy being should ever make. A tiny, startled squeak left her lips, wings of celestial flame blasting open with a violent whoosh that smelled faintly of burning starlight and ozone. heat washing over Rodney's face, even as the void froze his bones. "Unhand me this instant," she yelped, voice cracking in a way that would have gotten an angel fired. "Rodney, Rodney, let go!" "I don't want to die again," he roared, already spinning as the universe folded inside out around them. "You can't die in the transit. Oh, for the love of, release me!" But he clutched harder. His knuckles went white. His fingers dug into the glowing trim of her divine robes, nails scraping against something that felt both fabric and force at the same time. His legs windmilled helplessly in the void as direction lost all meaning and acceleration became a constant, merciless presence. The world fell upward. The sky fell inward. Rodney's bones vibrated like tuning forks as the portal dragged them through layers of existence not meant to be interacted with by panicking humans. Every nerve screamed contradictory information: pressure without weight, motion without movement, heat blooming inside cold so absolute it felt sharp. Time stretched, then compressed, then shattered entirely. Somewhere in the howl of cosmic wind, he heard Vera's voice lose all pretense of dignity. "No, no, 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 not that world!" Her pitch shot up an octave, fear cutting through divinity like a cracked bell. "That destination is locked, Rodney, you mindless twit. That realm is for them." Them who?" Rodney screamed as his consciousness rolled like a marble in a blender, thoughts slipping loose from each other, memories flashing out of order. "The rejected souls," she wailed. "The ones sent to the demon's realm. I cannot change the course now, you foolish creature." The last thing Rodney saw before everything collapsed was Vera's horrified expression. Eyes wide, hair whipping like a solar storm, wings flailing in a frantic swirl of celestial fire as she fought against a force that did not care she was a goddess. Then the universe spit them out like a bitter pill. Rodney hit the ground hard enough to question whether he still had vertebrae. Damp moss smacked his face. Something sharp, stone, bone, or something that used to be both, scraped along his arm. The impact knocked the breath from his lungs in a harsh, tearing gasp as cold slammed into him from every direction at once. The air here felt wrong. Thin, metallic, saturated with a faint iron tang that coated his tongue and tasted like old blood and forgotten violence. He groaned and rolled onto his back, limbs heavy and uncooperative, blinking through spots as his vision slowly steadied. Above him, a broken sky. Endless grey stretched in all directions, unmoving and oppressive, ash drifting down like snow that had given up on the idea of purity. Long black branches reached across the heavens, not attached to any visible trees, clawing at the clouds like skeletal hands frozen mid-grasp. Ancient ruins jutted between gnarled roots, cracked archways half swallowed by earth, shattered pillars leaning at impossible angles, stones etched with runes so worn they looked less carved and more scarred. This wasn't a place people built. It was a place they were left. Somewhere in the distance, something moaned. Not the groan of an animal, not the rustle of wind. Something dead, something trying to remember how to be alive. "Oh, hell no," Rodney whispered. The sound felt too loud. He sat up slowly, every muscle protesting, and that's when he saw Vera. She lay face down in a patch of colourless ferns, robes skewed, celestial aura flickering like a dying lantern in a storm. Her hair, normally a perfect comet tail of ordered starlight, now clung to her face in chaotic strands, sparking weakly with frustrated cosmic energy. For a terrifying moment, she didn't move. Then the goddess pushed herself upright with the sluggish determination of someone too angry to stay unconscious. She brushed dirt from her sleeves with sharp, irritated motions and lifted her gaze. Her eyes swept the ruined forest, the fog drifting low like exhausted breath, the silhouettes shuffling between the trees with jerky, puppet-like motions. Undead. Lots of them. Her voice broke on a sound smaller than a whisper. "Oh, stars above." A beat. "I have been dragged into a tutorial zone." Rodney stared at her. "So, we're not dead again?" Vera's head snapped toward him so fast he swore he heard her neck pop. Her expression shifted from disbelief to divine fury in half a heartbeat. "Rodney Hunter," she hissed, each word trembling with celestial outrage. "If we survive this place, I am personally ensuring your next reincarnation is as a sentient floor tile." Rodney raised a hand weakly. Can I be like a nice bathroom tile? Heated? Something classy?" "No." She stood, wobbling slightly, and light rippled around her like a nervous heartbeat. The ground dimmed beneath her feet, the vegetation curling away from her presence, as if afraid to touch divinity in such a foul mood. Rodney swallowed hard. If this place scared her, a cosmic sorting machine wearing a dress made of starfire, then he was absolutely, undeniably, monumentally screwed. The fog shifted. One of the silhouettes turned, not toward them, toward the sound they had made. Its head cracked sideways, jaw dangling open, faint blue lights flickering to life in empty sockets. Then another head lifted, then 3 more, then 7, dozens. Their movements were slow, jittery, uncoordinated, but undeniably purposeful. "Vera," Rodney whispered. "Yes, Rodney?" Her tone was calm in the way only someone on the brink of snapping could manage. "Are we, safe?" She placed a trembling hand against her forehead. "We are in the reject zone," she said. "The failed souls, the ones too impure for reincarnation, too stubborn to dissolve, too violent for the afterworlds to process." The closest corpse twitched its fingers, skin sloughing like wet parchment. Rodney's voice cracked. "So, no?" "No," she said. "Rodney Hunter, we are profoundly unsafe." The forest felt wrong, not quiet, expectant. The air hung thick with rot and damp moss, pressing against Rodney's lungs as though the world itself had paused to watch his next mistake. Somewhere water dripped. Somewhere else, something breathed that shouldn't have been breathing at all. Vera rose to her full height beside him, brushing dirt and leaves from her robes with the brittle dignity of someone who had already lost patience, but was too divine to admit it. She squared her shoulders, straightened the glowing trim, pulled her hair back into something resembling order. Then she pointed at him. "Do not wander, do not speak, do not touch anything," she snapped, each word landing like a sacred decree. "This realm reacts to foolishness, and Rodney Hunter, you are a walking catalyst." Rodney swallowed. His mouth felt cotton dry. "Is that bad?" A low, hollow moan drifted through the decaying trees behind him. Vera didn't turn. She just closed her eyes and breathed through her nose, slow and controlled, like a teacher resisting the urge to throw a chair across the room. "Well," she said flatly, "it appears your mere existence is triggering early spawns. Wonderful." Rodney rotated inch by inch. "T-trigger? What?" "You were supposed to arrive alone," she said, "maidenless, helpless, pathetic. This realm calibrates difficulty based on soul presence. But now," she gestured sharply at herself, "it believes you have a companion. That's good, right?" Her glare could have collapsed a star. "Monsters now perceive you as," she paused, choosing the word with surgical cruelty, "more delicious." Something stumbled between the crooked trees. A gaunt, rotting figure dragged one leg through the underbrush, grey-green skin stretched tight over jutting bone. One eye glowed faintly. The other dangled uselessly, swinging as it moved. Its jaw worked slowly, wet and uneven, like it was remembering how chewing used to function. Rodney took a step back. then another. Wait, what is that? Your first enemy, Vera said calmly. If you cannot kill it, you will die. Rodney laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound that broke immediately. What? I don't even have... Light exploded around him. When it faded, Rodney looked down. Tattered loincloth, bare feet pressing into cold, wet soil. A splintering wooden club clutched in his hands. He stared at himself, then up at her, then back at the club. What the actual hell? You selected this equipment yourself, Vera said primly. When? Your habits, your preferences, your history. She shuddered. It was obvious. Rodney lifted the club like it was personally insulting him. This is literally the hard mode starter kit. This is the I hate myself loadout. Yes, she said sweetly. It suits you. The zombie lurched closer. Rodney screamed. The sound tore out of him before he could stop it, raw, ugly, terrified. He raised the club with both hands, shaking so badly it rattled. The creature lunged. Rodney swung wildly. The club struck its shoulder with a wet thwack and rebounded hard, spinning Rodney in a half circle. He staggered, barely keeping his feet. Oh dear stars, Vera sighed. This is going to be embarrassing. The zombie lunged again. Rodney yelped, ducked, and swung in blind panic. The club smashed into its dangling eye by pure accident. Holy! That was an accident! The zombie shrieked, enraged, and slammed into him. Rodney hit the ground hard, breath exploding out of his lungs. Something sharp scraped across his forearm. Pain bloomed hot and immediate. Why is this so real? He screamed into the dirt. Death is very motivating, Vera replied. The creature loomed over him, rot-thick saliva dripping onto his face. He could smell it now. Sour meat, damp soil, something chemical and wrong. This was it. Something inside him snapped. Not courage, not skill, survival. His hand flailed blindly and closed around the fallen club buried in the moss. He screamed again, not words, just sound, and brought it down in a desperate overhead smash. Crack! The skull split. The body collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut. Rodney lay there gasping, staring at the broken corpse inches from his face. Steam rose faintly from the shattered bone. Then warmth rose from it. A soft spiral of energy slid into him, curling along his spine, flooding his chest, like inhaling after nearly drowning. Rodney jerked upright, scrambling backward. What was that? Your first soul, Vera said. Her voice carried a note that might have been pride or disgust. Rodney stared at his hands. They were slick with blood. Did I actually win? She studied him, expression strained. Disappointingly, yes. Rodney laughed once, sharp, hysterical. How is that disappointing? If you died during the tutorial, she said, you would have become a soulless zombie. Then I could leave. You'd leave me? Immediately. Rodney wiped blood across his cheek. Wow, genuinely comforting. The corpse twitched. Rodney screamed and jumped behind Vera like she was a divine riot shield. Oh, calm down, she groaned, flicking 2 fingers at the corpse. Residual necrotic discharge. It is quite dead. Rodney peeked over her shoulder. So, what now? Now, Vera said, I leave you. You've proven you are not entirely hopeless. A surprise to us both. Rodney blinked. What the hell you mean leave? There are conditions, she said, tone brightening into fake professionalism. I can appear wherever holy light shines. Lanterns like that one. She pointed to a rusted post behind them, faintly glowing green. Offer me connection. Rodney stared. Wait, so I can call you? Yes. Her eyes narrowed. But only in holy places, and only if you do not call me for trivial mortal complaints. Like being attacked? Correct. Her form flickered. Now then, walk west until you see the beacon light. I will be there. Hey, don't! She vanished. No flash, no sound, no farewell. Just gone. Rodney stood alone in the cold clearing, fog curling around gravestones that hadn't been there before. Silence rushed in like a tide. He spun slowly in a circle. Varia, Vegas, Veronica, nothing. Well, Rodney muttered, gripping his club tighter. I guess it's just me and the undead hellscape. Neat. Love that for me. A distant groan echoed. Rodney flinched so hard the club smacked his shin. Ow, God damn it. Okay. Calm. Breathe. One step at a time. Literally. He glanced once more at the corpse. He didn't feel proud. He didn't feel strong. He felt alive. Panicked. Shaking. Entirely unsure of himself. But alive. Rodney swallowed and turned toward the forest path. The fog swallowed him within 5 paces. Okay, he whispered. Let's survive this tutorial. First goal, don't die. Second goal, don't die in a stupid way. Third, a twig snapped nearby. Rodney froze. Third goal is probably also just not dying. He forced 1 foot forward, then another. Somewhere ahead, a beacon light flickered. Somewhere behind him, something groaned louder. Rodney tightened his grip and walked. An old iron gate loomed ahead, broken and swaying in the dead wind. And for the first time in his life, every step mattered. Movement. His eyes flicked up. The first zombie, the one he'd flattened, was already up again. Its skull was dented. Half its face sagged inward like rotten fruit someone had squeezed too hard. But it moved anyway, shambling forward with awful determination, dragging one twisted leg as it walked straight into the path of Rodney's overextended follow-through. He was still mid-swing. He'd thrown everything into that last hit. His weight was wrong, his balance gone. Cold, dead fingers clamped onto his shoulders from behind. Another hand scraped along the side of his head, tangling in his hair with a grip like icy fish hooks. The sensation ripped across his scalp, sharp and crawling. Rodney's breath hitched, a choked sound caught between a sob and a scream. The undead leaned in close. He could smell it, rot and damp earth, and the cloying sweetness of decay packed into old cloth. Its grip tightened, trying to drag him down, to pin him, to rip something off that he'd really rather keep. Oh, shit! He kicked and thrashed, heels digging into the dirt as he bucked wildly beneath the zombie's weight. Dead fingers scraped across his scalp and clawed at his shirt, cold and sharp like broken glass. He rolled, once, twice, until the corpse slid off him with a heavy, wet thud. His head cracked against something on the way down. A burst of warmth spilled across his temple. Blood. His blood. It trickled down the side of his face, hot against the graveyard chill. The slick, sticky realness of it nearly broke him. This wasn't a HP bar dipping into the red. This was meat splitting, bone ringing, the kind of injury you didn't walk off without stitches. No. Adrenaline sputtered, threatening to abandon him. His limbs felt soggy and slow, muscles trying to fire through the syrup of shock. His lungs dragged in air in ragged, wheezing pulls as he crab-scrambled backward on his hands and arse, kicking up dirt and leaves in blind terror. The zombie didn't bother standing. It clawed after him on all fours, movements nightmarishly fast, joints jerking with unnatural strength. Its jaw hung crooked, bouncing up and down like a broken hinge as it crawled, teeth clicking against each other with hungry eagerness. Rodney screamed, raw, high, unfiltered. No ironic commentary, no meme shield, just fear. The thing lunged. Its teeth snapped inches from his heel, jaws closing on empty air with a loud, cracking bite. He kicked frantically, heels pounding against the earth as he scooted back as fast as his body would go. Another lunge, another snap of teeth. It gained on him with every desperate shuffle. His breath came out in rapid, panicked bursts, fog spraying from his mouth like frantic ghosts. Then, thud. His back hit stone. A headstone. Massive, cold, utterly unmovable. Nowhere else to go. The zombie gathered itself, more stretching wide as it hurled its ruined body forward, claws reaching, teeth gnashing for his ankles, his calves, anything it could tear into. Rodney planted one boot, braced his back against the stone, and kicked with everything he had left. Crack, splinter. His heel connected perfectly with the zombie's open mouth. Rotten teeth exploded inward, shards punching through bone. Its entire face crumpled like wet paper under a hammer. Whatever faint, sickly light had been smouldering in its eyes flickered once, then went out. The corpse went slack. It collapsed across his legs, suddenly just dead weight. A ruined coat dumped over his shins. Rodney lay there for a moment, panting and half sobbing, the club still death-gripped in his hand. His palms were slick with blood, his and theirs. His pulse hammered in his ears so loud he almost couldn't hear the wind anymore. He blinked, but the right side of his vision stayed smeared, tinted red where blood had run down over his eye. The world had turned into a watercolor painting someone had spilled wine across. He wanted to puke. He wanted to sleep. He wanted to go home. But then he felt it. A warmth, slow, creeping, radiating from the corpse tangled over his legs. Not physical heat, not exactly. More like a pulse in the air that hummed beneath his skin, seeping into his bones the way hot water seeped into chilled fingers. It reached through the exhaustion and panic and pain, tugging at him. Rodney dragged in a shaky breath. He staggered upright, using the headstone behind him as a brace until his legs remembered how to stand. The world swayed, tilting slightly to one side, darkness creeping in at the edges of his vision like the corners of the screen were closing in. His blood soaked his shirt, still warm against the graveyard's breath. He looked down. Two bodies sprawled at his feet, twisted, broken things. One had its chest stomped in, ribs poking up like jagged bars of a shattered cage. The other's face was a collapsed ruin of bone and mush, features smeared into something unrecognizable. Real. Dead. Horrifying. His stomach lurched. For a second he thought he might actually vomit onto them. But the warmth in his chest thickened, spreading out from his heart like liquid sunlight forced through tired veins. The club in his hand still thrummed with that same lingering soul energy, a weak current crackling through the wood into his fingers. He tightened his grip until his knuckles hurt. Maybe I can do this, he whispered. It wasn't confident. It wasn't even hopeful. It was just less defeated than he'd felt a minute ago. He forced one foot in front of the other, past the toppled stones, past the crooked angels with their missing heads and cracked wings, watching him with eyeless faces as he limped by. Toward the distant green lantern fire glowing faintly deeper in the graveyard. It burned like a sickly star among the headstones, just bright enough to promise something. Rest, safety, or just the next bad idea. He never noticed the shadow waiting behind the next massive gravestone. Too large, too jagged, too close, until it moved. A blur caught in the corner of his eye, dark, fast, wrong. Rodney turned a heartbeat too late. The zombie lunged out of the darkness with unnatural speed, its jaw unhinging wider than a human mouth should. Its teeth gleamed wet in the cold light. Thunk. It hit him like a sledgehammer. The impact drove all the air from his lungs in a single brutal exhale. He was slammed backward onto the ground, the club flying from his hand. The sky spun overhead. Stone, tree, fog, nothing, all swirling into a smeared carousel. Dead fingers clamped onto his shoulders, nails piercing his shirt, digging into skin. Before he could even scream, its teeth sank into the soft place between his neck and collarbone. Rodney shrieked, high, raw, animal, the sound ripping out of him without permission. The bite tore deeper, shredding skin and muscle, ripping through whatever it could lock onto. White-hot shock blasted through him, then flipped into a cold so intense it felt like his blood was being replaced with ice water. He swung his free hand toward where his club should have been, but his fingers touched only cold earth and damp moss. He grabbed nothing. He tried to hit the zombie anyway, but the blow was weak, uncoordinated, barely more than a slap against its rotting side. The monster didn't even flinch. It tore at his chest next, claws raking through cloth and flesh and deeper. Pain flared in jagged spikes, then blurred together into one continuous scream that filled his entire world. His knees buckled. He went down hard, the zombie dragging him with it, their combined weight crushing him into the dirt. "No, no, get off!" he choked, gagging on his own blood. It bubbled hot in his throat, copper and salt and terror. His hands slipped on slick, rotting skin. He pushed, clawed, grabbed at anything he could find, but his fingers kept sliding off, too weak, too slow. The zombie clawed into his ribs, teeth gnashing at his shoulder, his arm, his throat. Each bite was another theft of warmth, another yank at the threads keeping him here. His vision flickered, colors draining out. The graveyard dimmed at the edges, the world closing in to a narrow, bloody tunnel. The pain became distant, then enormous, then nothing. He felt the cold of the grave seep into him from every direction, through his wounds, through his breath, through the space behind his eyes. It filled him, heavy and absolute. His heartbeat faltered. His chest hitched once, shallow and wet. The world dimmed. And as the last thread of life slipped from his grasp, one thought cut through the fading noise. This world didn't care that he'd killed 2 zombies. It didn't care that he was trying hard, trying for once. It only cared that he was prey, and it had finally caught him. Chapter 6. You died. The green lantern pulsed. Its sickly light flared once, twice, 3 times, like a heartbeat struggling to restart. On the 4th pulse, a shape coalesced beneath it. Bare feet, scarred legs, a rough, blood-stained loincloth. A familiar, splintered wooden club clutched in one hand. Rod stood by the lamppost. Not Rodney. He didn't gasp awake. No flailing, no scrambling, no panicked clawing at his chest, no hands flying to his throat to check for a bite that wasn't there. He simply existed. One moment there was only the lantern and the fog. The next, he was there, solid, steady, like he'd been standing guard all along. His eyes opened slowly. They weren't Rodney's eyes. Same shape, same color, same face. But the way they focused, sharp, cold, like someone had wiped the fear out with a rag and left only intent. He looked down at his body. His skin was whole, no torn flesh, no shredded shoulder, no bite mark at his throat, no jagged furrows across his ribs. But faint impressions lingered, ghosts of wounds, a dull ache where teeth had ripped him open before, a phantom sting along his chest where claws had dragged through skin, a memory of pain with no injury to match. He flexed his fingers one by one around the handle of the club, testing their strength. No tremor, no weakness. Each joint responded perfectly. He rolled his shoulder. The ghost ache nagged him, then faded as he dismissed it. His eyes swept the graveyard. He didn't seem surprised to be here. The crooked headstones, the skeletal trees, the air so cold it felt thin, like he was breathing the leftovers of someone else's oxygen. The fog coiling low to the ground like it was waiting for orders. He took it all in, not like someone waking in a nightmare, more like someone returning to a familiar street. Rod exhaled once, slowly. The lantern flame hummed softly beside him, its green light painting his bare chest and arms in sickly hues. No warmth came from it, only that faint, pulsing wrongness. He didn't flinch. He didn't step closer. He didn't step away. He simply turned his head. Something moved in the dark between the graves. The only change in his expression was the small narrowing of his eyes. A corpse stepped into view, then another, then 3 more. They came shambling between the headstones, drawn toward the lantern's glow. Their movements were slow but not mindless, like broken animals that had been pointed at a smell and told to hunt. One of them still had Rodney's blood smeared across its jaw. Rod watched them. No panic, no backing away. He shifted the club in his hand, bringing it up into a loose, almost casual guard. His stance adjusted effortlessly, feet apart, knees bent, shoulders loose. It wasn't textbook. It wasn't pretty, but it was balanced. The nearest zombie let out a low, rattling moan and lunged. Rod didn't shriek. He didn't stumble. He simply stepped sideways. The attack passed through the space he'd just been standing in. As the zombie stumbled forward, Rod brought the club down across the back of its neck in a clean, merciless swing. Crack! The body dropped, strings cut. He didn't watch it fall. The second one was already coming. This one moved faster. Maybe it had died sprinting. Maybe it had remembered. Its legs pumped hard, feet slapping the ground in a messy, aggressive charge. Rod's eyes flicked to it, calculating the distance, the angle, the timing. He didn't retreat. He went forward. He stepped into the charge, cutting the distance in half before the zombie expected it. The creature swiped out. He ducked under the claw without looking like he was in a hurry, his body dropping and twisting in one fluid movement. The club came up in an arcing uppercut. The blow struck the underside of the zombie's jaw with a sickening crunch. Teeth shattered upward. The head jerked back violently. Something in its neck snapped. It staggered, legs wobbling. Rod finished the motion, spun with the momentum, and brought the club down across its temple. Another sharp, efficient crack of bone. Another corpse collapsing into the dirt. The other 3 closed in from different angles, one from the left, one from the right, one from straight ahead. Claws out, teeth bared, rotten breath pouring in foul waves. Rod didn't seem overwhelmed. He flowed. The one on the left came first, reaching for his face. Rod pivoted just enough to let the grasping hand sail past his cheek, then hammered the club into its elbow. The joint folded the wrong way with a heavy, meaty pop. The limb went limp as the creature toppled forward. He stepped aside, letting the zombie's own momentum drag it past him, then drove the end of the club into the back of its head like pounding a nail. Wet impact. Stillness. The one from the right was already mid-swing. He didn't dodge. This time, he blocked. Rod shifted the club into both hands and met the incoming arm with the shaft, catching the blow on the wood. The impact rattled, but he absorbed it with his stance, legs grounded. Before the zombie could pull back, he twisted the club, rolling the limb open and exposing its side. His knee came up, sharp and brutal, slamming into its collapsing ribcage. Something caved. The zombie folded around the strike, gasping in a sound that might have once been breath. Rod stepped around it, fluid, economical, and cracked the club across the back of its skull without even looking directly at it. The last one reached him a second later. It swung for his throat with both claws. He stepped inside the arc of its arms and let them scrape along his shoulders, too close to build any real force. The zombie's face was right there now. Teeth, rotten tongue, molted gum flesh. If Rodney had been here, he would have screamed. Rod raised his head and met its gaze. No emotion, no fear, no disgust. just an almost clinical interest. He drove his forehead into its face. Bone met bone with a solid, heavy crack. The zombie's nose disintegrated into blackened pulp. It reeled backward, stunned. Rod followed, pressing the attack, his heel slamming down on its knee. The leg bent sideways with a snapping crunch. It dropped to one knee, jerking. He lifted the club one more time, brought it down, once. The graveyard went quiet again. Fog drifted lazily across the ground, curling around the pile of corpses at his feet. The green lantern flame steadied, shedding its thin, sickly glow over the scene, like someone had installed a streetlight over a crime. Rod stood in the middle of it all, breathing evenly, heart steady, body humming not with panic, but with a strange, distant satisfaction. 4 bodies, 4 kills. Souls peeled free and drifted toward him. He let them in. Warmth settled behind his sternum, heavy, familiar. Then the calm cracked. Memory rushed back. Disgust followed. "That wasn't me," he whispered. The lantern flickered beside him. Rodney turned away. And somewhere deep inside him, something waited. Chapter 7. "That wasn't me," he whispered. Not meaning that he didn't remember. Meaning it didn't feel like him. Not the Rodney who panicked and flailed and made memes to cope. Not the Rodney who second-guessed everything. This had been different. Precise. Instinctive. Predatory. The memory of how steady his breathing had been made goosebumps crawl over his skin. He wasn't missing time. He was missing an explanation. The lantern flame flickered softly beside him, its green glow throwing long shadows across his face. His reflection in the metal rim looked back at him, and for a moment, just a moment, his own eyes felt like they were studying him. Rodney tore his gaze away. "Nope. Nope. We're not doing that. Don't be weird," he muttered, forcing a shaky breath through his teeth. "I'm alive. I fought. I won. That's all." He hoped saying it out loud would make it true. It didn't. The graveyard hummed with quiet expectancy as he turned toward the distant white-gold glow of the temple. He could feel the weight of the souls he'd absorbed still settling inside him, warm and cold at the same time. Too heavy for what they were. Too familiar. He looked down at the undead one had been holding a short sword, rusty and damaged. He dropped the club and picked the sword up and started walking. He didn't look back at the lantern. But he felt, not knew, felt, that the next time he woke beneath it, it might not be this calm. The sword felt wrong in his hand. Not because it was damaged, though it was, chipped along the edge like it had been sharpened with a brick, but because it felt real, heavy, cold, carved from a world that did not care whether he lived long enough to swing it. Rodney gave it a few tentative arcs through the air. Clumsy, stiff, but familiar in some distant, nostalgic muscle memory kind of way. Old flashes bubbled up in his head. CA weekends sweating under borrowed armor, foam sword LARP fights behind the gym, late nights sparring with friends in duct-taped gauntlets because none of them wanted to admit they were lonely. He hadn't thought about any of that in years. Now, it was suddenly the only useful thing he had. "All right," he murmured, voice shaky but determined. "Sword and board it is, if I ever find a board." A laugh, small, embarrassed, almost painful, escaped him before he could stop it. Hearing it here felt wrong, like smiling at a funeral. His gaze drifted back to the corpse he'd pried the sword from. Its boots were still intact, dark leather, thick soles, caked in grave dirt. Gear, loot, survival. His stomach twisted, but he crouched down anyway. Well, guess we're doing this the messy way. He used the sword to hack at the half-rotten ligaments holding the boots to the zombie's ankles. Wet strings snapped. Flesh peeled. The smell hit him like a slap. Rodney gagged once, twice, but the boots came free. He scraped them against the grass until they looked merely gross instead of violently cursed, then slipped them on. The moment his heel settled, something clicked. Like a sixth sense he didn't remember having woke up. He just knew they were better. Not great, not special, but better than bare feet on freezing grave soil. A tired smile tugged at him. I can loot what exists, not just what the world decides to give me. That felt important, like a loophole, like a class perk. Something Vera definitely hadn't intended. He tightened his grip on the short sword and looked down the graveyard path. The holy light in the distance streamed upward, pale and patient, cutting a thin wound through the fog above the trees. Waiting. Calling. Okay, Rodney whispered. I can do this. I just need answers. He stepped deeper into the graveyard. The deeper he went, the worse the silence became. Every crooked stone felt closer than it had before. Every shadow seemed to lean. The fog thickened unevenly, drifting in strange, deliberate currents, as though reacting to his presence. His footsteps were too loud. His heartbeat was louder. One zombie at a time, he reminded himself. Singles, never groups. Groups get you eaten. He weaved between toppled monuments and cracked stone angels sagging like they were exhausted from centuries of watching people die here. He rounded a cluster of headstones and froze. A zombie stood ahead, swaying gently, unaware of him. It looked freshly dead, boots intact, pants shredded, shirt slashed open at the ribs. But what drew Rodney's eye was the armor. A skullcap helmet. Rusted, dented, but undeniably real. Should I even try something like this? His brain hesitated. His gut didn't. Hell yes, I should. He slipped behind taller stones, circling with careful steps. His new boots muffled his weight better than he expected. As he closed the distance, his pulse quickened, but not entirely from fear. There was something else there. A cold clarity, a focus, a predator's patience. Rodney shoved that thought down and emerged just a few feet behind the undead. The zombie swayed, slow and oblivious, head listing to one side. Rodney raised the sword, hesitated, then thrust forward with a sharp, desperate motion. The blade punched through soft, rotted tissue and jammed against the spine. The zombie lurched, arms flailing. It turned sharply, jaw snapping. Too close. Rodney yanked the blade sideways, tearing it free with a spray of blackened blood. The zombie stumbled. He stepped in and drove the point up under its jaw. A choked, gurgling sound rattled through its ruined throat as it collapsed to its knees. Then it fell still. Rodney stood over it, panting, sword trembling in his grip. Not wait for it to move, not hesitate, finish it. He brought the sword down across its skull. The body slumped fully. The soul, thin, pale, frayed, peeled upward and sank into his chest. Warm and cold, heavy and hollow all at once. Rodney's breath hitched. Everything felt too sharp, too vivid, like his nerves were waking up, or rewiring. He shook himself and crouched by the corpse. The helmet came free with a wet scrape. More rot peeled off with it. Gross, gross, holy shit, gross, he muttered, wiping the edges against moss before slipping it on. It was cold, then warm. Then it fit too comfortably, like it remembered ahead and decided his would do. Rodney swallowed hard. "Okay," he whispered. "That's not unsettling at all." He straightened slowly and looked toward the holy light again. The fog shifted. Something deeper in the graveyard groaned. Not the soft, dragging moan of the zombies. Something larger, heavier, awake. Rodney tightened his grip on the sword. Looting wasn't just helping him survive. The graveyard was reacting, watching, scaling. And the closer he got to the temple, the more it felt like something ahead was waiting for him specifically. He took one steady breath, then stepped forward. Chapter 8. Graveyard Patrol. The holy light stayed distant, always distant. Rodney kept expecting it to draw nearer as he walked, for the fog to thin, or the sky to brighten, or the air to shift. But the beacon ahead remained stubbornly far away, like the world itself was stretching between him and it. A treadmill made of graves. "Cool," he muttered. "Love a good cosmic prank. Really builds character." His voice died quickly in the fog, swallowed like it was afraid to travel too far. He tightened his grip on the sword. The helmet felt heavy on his skull, the boots stiff around his ankles, but he felt safer. Not safe, just less naked. One zombie at a time. Find loot. Don't panic. Don't die again. Simple plan. He took a deep breath. Crunch. Rodney froze. That sound hadn't come from him. Slowly, painfully slowly, he turned his head to the right. 3 silhouettes moved between the gravestones. Not shuffling, not wandering, patrolling. Step, step, pause. Heads turning in eerie synchronicity, jaws slack, eyes dim but aware in a hollow, instinctual way. Patrols? They have patrols? Why do they have that? The nearest zombie turned sharply, head cocking like a crow spotting movement. Rodney ducked behind a monument, heart pounding so loud he was sure the undead could hear it. Don't move. Don't breathe. Don't. The patrol stopped. Rotting faces tilted upward, sniffing the air. Something cold slid down Rodney's spine. He clutched the sword tighter, knuckles whitening. Then the zombies split, 2 heading left, 1 drifting right. Right. Toward him. Rodney's thoughts spiraled. Fight it. No. Run. No. Running draws the others. No. Hiding might work? No. Nothing works. No. No. A cold clarity washed over him, slicing through the panic like a knife through cloth. His breath slowed, his shoulders lowered, his stance adjusted instinctively. He wasn't choosing calm, it was choosing him. The zombie drifted around the monument, inches away. Its ruined hand brushed the stone right where his cheek had been moments earlier. Rodney stepped forward before he realized he was moving. One clean thrust, upward, under the jaw, into the skull. The zombie jerked once and sagged. Rodney lowered the body silently, carefully. He didn't breathe until it touched the ground. The other 2 hadn't noticed. They drifted further along their route, shuffling into the deeper fog. Rodney exhaled shakily. What is wrong with me? He remembered everything. He'd chosen that attack. He'd seen the angle and moved without thinking. Not panic. Not desperation. Precision. Rodney swallowed hard, forcing his hands to stop trembling. He crouched and worked quickly, stripping the corpse of anything useful. A belt, a pouch, a dagger with a badly notched edge. Every little thing mattered. Every scrap of metal was one more chance to live. He rose slowly, eyes following the dissolving patrol until they vanished behind the crooked stone rows. That was almost bad. That was bad. He pushed deeper into the graveyard. The fog thickened again. The stones grew taller. The trees twisted tighter overhead. And the ground began to slope downward, subtly at first, then steeply enough that he had to brace his steps. The air changed. Colder, heavier, oily, like the breath of something sleeping in a chamber deep beneath him. The holy light still flickered ahead, but now it pulsed, slow, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. He didn't like what that implied. Rodney took another cautious step and heard it. Not the drag of feet, not the groan of patrols. A thump, a heavy, deliberate thump. Then another, close enough that dust vibrated off the nearest headstone. Rodney's breath stopped. Those aren't zombie footsteps. No, this was something big, something that walked with purpose. A boss. The fog shifted, as though bowing away from the sound. Even the undead patrols seemed to retreat, drifting into the deeper shadows and falling silent. Whatever was coming, they didn't want to be near it. Rodney pressed his back against a tilted monument, chest tight, fingers slick on the sword hilt. The thumps grew louder, closer, steady, like a massive, rotting heart beating against the earth. Something moved in the fog, tall, broad, the silhouette warped but unmistakably humanoid. Huge, armored, dragging something behind it. Metal scraped stone. Rodney's throat closed. Nope, absolutely not. I'm too level 1 for this. His heart hammered against his ribs. Every instinct screamed, run. Every instinct screamed, don't move. Both impulses tangled in his chest until he felt frozen in place. The huge silhouette paused, turned slightly, listening. Rodney didn't dare breathe. A distant moan echoed from the far side of the graveyard. One of the patrols had spotted something. The massive figure turned sharply toward the sound, then lumbered away, footsteps pounding like falling trees. Rodney sagged to his knees, shaking in silent relief. I'm gonna die in this tutorial. I'm not even out of the graveyard. I haven't even gotten to the lady who tried to drop-kick me into reincarnation hell. He wiped sweat from his face, unsure how he was sweating in this cold, and forced himself back to standing. He looked toward the holy light. Still distant, still waiting. Rodney swallowed hard. Okay. One step at a time. Just don't get eaten. Don't get stomped. Don't. A bone snapped behind him. Rodney spun. A zombie lurched directly at him, closer than it had any right to be. He swung the sword out of instinct. The blade caught it low across the ribs. Cracked bone. The zombie staggered. Rodney stepped in, finishing it with a clean thrust to the skull. The body dropped. The soul slid into him. Warm. Cold. Wrong. He exhaled shakily and wiped the blade on the grass. Okay, I guess we're doing this. He tightened his grip and marched forward, toward the pulsing light, toward the temple, toward whatever massive thing stalked the graveyard. The path narrowed. The fog thinned, and the sound of dragging metal echoed faintly somewhere ahead. Chapter 9. Hollow Lantern. Rodney tightened his grip on the sword and headed deeper into the graveyard. Rodney pushed deeper into the graveyard until the path split into 4 narrow roads, each one swallowed by fog thick enough to chew. The air felt heavier here, colder, like the world was holding its breath. And in the very center of the crossroads, someone was crouched. A man, or what was left of one, hunched low with his arms wrapped around his knees, rocking back and forth. His hair hung in greasy ropes over his face, and his clothes were little more than shredded rags clinging to sickly, sunken skin. He whispered to himself in a thin, papery voice, "No need to run. No need to fear. The lantern keeps the dark away. Warmth. Warm warmth. Just sit by the glow, yes. Yes. Sit and wait. Rodney blinked. Buddy, there's no lantern here. The hollowed man didn't look up, didn't pause. His fingers twitched, scraping at the dirt. It's right there, bright as the gods, warm as a mother's touch. You don't see it? Ha, ha. Oh, you're already slipping, aren't you? Yes, yes, slipping just like me. Rodney took a step back. Okay, cool, great talk. A shift in the fog, a scrape of bone on stone. Rodney turned toward the sound, then another noise flared behind him. He spun again, then again. Shapes were sliding out of the mist from every side, slow and inevitable, tightening around him like a noose. His stomach dropped straight through his boots. Seriously? Now? 4 shapes slid out of the mist, silent except for the rasp of bone dragging against stone. 4 zombies, more intact than the others he'd fought, moving with disturbing coordination. And each one had something useful, something tempting, something he desperately needed. The first held a long sword and a battered but serviceable iron shield. The second staggered forward, wearing a torn chainmail shirt, rusted but intact enough to save his ribs. The third dragged its feet beneath a pair of decent greaves strapped tight with fraying leather. And the fourth flexed its hands, wearing padded leather gauntlets with metal plates sewn into the knuckles, the kind of gear that would keep him from losing fingers in close combat. The hollowed NPC didn't react, didn't even flinch. He just kept rocking. Safe in the lantern's glow, safe in the warm light. Don't stray. Don't stray. Rodney swallowed. You've got to be kidding me. The 4 zombies moved closer, tightening the circle around him, cutting off every escape. Hungry, focused, silent. Rodney knew exactly what the smart move was. Run. Get out. Live another 5 minutes. But the loot. God, the loot. He tightened his aching fingers around the sword handle, pulse thudding in his ears. All right, he muttered, forcing the tremor out of his voice. Guess we're doing this. The hollowed man giggled softly. Yes, yes, that's it. The dark is always hungry. And then the zombies lunged. Rodney backed away from the zombie with the sword and shield, heart jackhammering in his chest. No way was he taking that thing head on. He pivoted hard and darted around the one behind him, the one with the greaves. Its claws scraped across his back as he slipped past, sharp enough to tear fabric and skin, but not deep enough to drag him down. He hit the ground in a rough shoulder roll and came up swinging, his blade carving a ragged line across the greave zombie's spine. It lurched forward with a wet grunt, and the sword and shield zombie barreled straight into it. The two collided like sacks of rotten meat, arms flailing, jaws snapping. They weren't smart enough to stop hacking at whatever was closest, and the armored one's sword dug deep into its stumbling friend's torso. They tangled themselves into their own miniature war. Yeah, fight each other, idiots, Rodney muttered, breath ragged. The other two were closing from the sides now, tighter, coordinated, cutting off the gaps. His only shot was the one wearing the gauntlets. Rodney lunged at it. He kicked its knee to stagger it, then slashed across its face. The blade carved through both eyes, bursting them like overripe grapes. The zombie shrieked, reeling blindly, and he followed up with a brutal cut across the arm, nearly severing it. That's when he felt hands, bone dry, cold, impossibly strong, clamp onto his shoulders. Terror hit him like a punch to the lungs, too fast, too damn fast. He twisted his head just in time to see the aftermath of the zombie brawl. One lay twitching on the ground, already collapsing into stillness. And the other, the one with the sword, was coming straight at him. Pinned. No leverage. No escape. Rodney heaved backward, trying to rip free from the fingers locked around him. He barely moved an inch. The blade came down. Agony flared white-hot as his arm went numb, the sword biting so deep his hand nearly dropped off his body. The zombie holding him spasmed from the force of the blow, and its grip loosened. Just enough. Rodney tore himself free on sheer panic. He didn't scream, didn't breathe, just lashed out blindly behind him, the sword catching one of them across the hand. Fingers flew off into the fog. He staggered, rolled, and gained a few precious feet of breathing room. His arm dangled, useless and slick with blood. It felt like it might tear off if he moved it wrong. Panic surged up his throat, hot and choking. Not now, he told himself. Freak out later, if you live that long. The blind one wandered aimlessly near the muttering, hollowed man, who still rocked back and forth, whispering about a lantern that didn't exist. The other two, the dangerous two, were already turning toward him again. Rodney braced himself, sword trembling in his good hand. Time to finish this, or die again. The zombie came at him fast, faster than he could dodge, its three-fingered claws reaching and its rotting jaw stretching wide. Rodney did the only thing he could think of. He turned his ruined arm toward it, offering the part of him that was already mangled beyond healing. The pain was blinding, white-hot, instant, all-consuming. He used that pain like fuel. With a hoarse, ragged roar, he shoved his sword straight through the zombie's skull. The point burst out the back of its cranium in a spray of dark rot. The grip on his deadened arm loosened, and Rodney ripped the blade free just as the corpse went limp. He barely had time to exhale. The shield slammed into his face with the force of a battering ram. His vision exploded into stars as he spun sideways, his body hitting the ground hard enough to knock every thought out of his skull. The world went black for a heartbeat, maybe longer. Then a burning stab of agony in his stomach yanked him back. Rodney screamed as the sword drove into him from above, pinning him to the dirt like a bug. His eyes flew open, bloodshot, wild, and he grabbed at the blade with his free hand, swinging his short sword weakly at the zombie's legs. The cuts landed, shallow, frantic, useless. The zombie didn't even flinch. It only raised its weapon for another strike. No, no, no! Rodney kicked out, desperate, his boot connected square with the creature's knees. Crack. Both joints snapped inward with a sick, splintering sound. The zombie toppled backwards, shrieking as its legs folded underneath it like wet twigs. Rodney scrambled up, half crawling, half falling onto it. He brought the short sword down again and again, sobbing with pain and fury. Die! Just die! Please die! Wet, ragged stabbing sounds filled the crossroads until the zombie finally stopped thrashing. Rodney sagged forward, gasping. He looked up, vision swimming. Only the blind one remained. He staggered to his feet, or tried to. His legs trembled violently, barely able to hold him. When he looked down, he finally saw the truth. His arm was gone, ripped clean off. Blood pooled at his feet in a spreading, ugly, dark stain. No. No, no, no! The blind zombie stumbled close enough for him to reach. Rodney, shaking and furious, swung the sword in a clean arc and took its head off in one blow. Warm energy flooded him instantly, stronger than before. It poured into his core, swirling through his chest and spine like sunlight forced down his throat. He blinked hard, praying his arm would grow back, praying the wounds would vanish. But nothing changed. The blood kept dripping. His knees kept shaking. He was dying. He swayed, vision tunneling, until he saw it. The lantern. Burning bright in the center of the crossroads. Glowing gold, warm, steady, impossible. When did that? The hollowed man knelt beside it, worshipping it like a shrine. Rodney stumbled toward the light, reaching out with what little life he had left. "Please," he begged silently. "Please, goddess, please." I tried. His fingers brushed the flame. It swallowed him whole. Fire roared through him, not hot, not cruel, but purifying. Layer by layer, the agony peeled away, his flesh rebuilding, bones knitting, skin sealing, blood returning to his veins. His arm grew back in a shimmering blur of light. When the fire faded, he stood, whole again. The hollowed man smiled lazily, rocking beside the lantern. "Frank told you. Frank knows. Lantern warm. Lantern safe." His eyes were cloudy, distant. The others didn't listen. His voice thinned to almost nothing. They were eaten. Rodney turned slowly, heart still hammering. The zombies' bodies lay scattered, real and unmoving. He deserved that loot. He earned it. The crossroads around him were quiet. Fog pooled low and thick, clinging to the ground like it didn't want to leave. 4 bodies lay where they'd fallen, twisted, broken, still. The zombies looked smaller now that they weren't moving, less like monsters, more like refuse that no one had bothered to drag off the road. Rodney stared at them. He knew what he had to do. He hated that he knew it so quickly. He took a slow breath, forcing his voice steady. "Okay," he murmured. "Loot, then freak out. Priorities." A dry, papery whisper murmured behind him. "Lantern warm. Lantern safe. Stay close. Stay close. Don't stray. Don't stray." Rodney turned. The hollowed man sat near the lantern, almost pressed against the iron post like he was trying to crawl inside the light. Arms wrapped around his knees, back hunched, eyes half-lidded and staring at the flame as if it was the only thing left in the universe worth seeing. Rodney had heard him talk before the fight, half sense and half madness. At the time, he'd been too busy dying to really listen. Now the man's voice seemed woven into the fog, constant, low, looping. Warm glow, safe glow. Don't leave it, no, never leave it. The dark takes things, takes pieces. Rodney watched him for a moment. Frank rocked slightly with each whispered phrase, like a boat tethered in a black sea. He wanted to ask 100 questions. Instead, he turned back to the bodies. Loot first, freak out later, definitely later, hopefully never. He walked up to the first corpse, the one that had carried the sword and shield. Up close, the shield looked worse. From a distance, he'd thought it just had a dent. Up close, he could see the metal had been caved inward in a wide, ugly bowl, like someone had swung a wrecking ball or dropped an angry god onto it. Fine cracks spiderwebbed from the crater, reaching toward the rim like they were just waiting for an excuse to finish the job. "Jesus," Rodney muttered. "What did you block? A meteor?" The corpse's arm was still locked through the straps, fingers clenched so tight it looked painful even in death. Rodney knelt and pried at them. The leather resisted, stiff with age and tacky with whatever passed for zombie residue. He braced his foot against the body's chest and yanked. The shield tore free with a sticky, peeling sound that made his skin crawl. For half a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, ping! A thin new crack etched itself along the edge of the metal, crawling like frost across glass. Rodney flinched. No, 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 not yet. You don't get to break yet. He slid his arm through the straps before the thing could change its mind. The weight dragged his left shoulder down, making his stance lopsided. Even just holding it, he could feel the damaged metal flex ever so slightly. "Okay," he said under his breath. "You're on borrowed time. So am I. We'll get along great." He looked at the sword next. It was better than a club. That was about the nicest thing he could say. The blade was short, halfway between a gladius and a big kitchen knife. Nicks lined the edge. A faint bend near the tip said somebody had tried to stab something very solid and lost the argument. The hilt wrap had mostly flaked off, leaving bare tang that bit into his palm. He picked it up anyway. The weight settled into his right hand with a familiarity he wished felt comforting instead of ominous. A tiny, guilty thread of pride tugged at his chest. Starting weapon, trash. Current loadout, still trash, but upgraded trash. Progress. He slid the blade experimentally between his fingers, then strapped the corpse's scabbard around his waist. The leather creaked in protest, but held. "Thanks, man," Rodney muttered to the dead. "Sorry I murdered you again after you murdered me first. We're even?" The corpse didn't argue. He moved on to the next fallen zombie. This one wore chainmail, or what was left of it. At a glance, it looked solid enough. A shirt of interlocking rings hanging heavy over the rotted torso. But as Rodney tugged it free, whole clumps of links rattled loose and spilled onto the gravel, like coins dropping from a torn purse. Up close, he saw the truth. Half the rings near the center had been pulled out of shape, more oval than round. Some were split entirely, hanging open like broken jaws. Sections near the shoulders were bald, bare tunic peeking through where protection should have been. He held it up with both hands and let it sag. "This is fine," he told himself. "This is great. It's, ventilated." He forced the corpse's arms out of the sleeves and peeled the chainmail away. Each movement made another tiny shower of rings hit the ground with high, traitorous tinks. By the time he wriggled into the shirt himself, it felt less like armor and more like wearing a heavy, faintly cursed fishnet. The mail scratched at his skin. Some of the broken rings pinched whenever he moved. The weight dragged at his shoulders and settled on his spine like a disapproving hand. "You are absolutely going to fail me," he told it. "I can feel it in my bones." But he buckled it in place anyway. Marginally better than nothing was still better than nothing. The third corpse wore greaves. "Leg armor," Rodney said, more to keep his brain busy than anything. "Okay, cool. Let's pretend I know how those work outside of video games." The shin plates were dull and scuffed, edges marked with countless little dings. Deep gouges scored one side where something with claws had tried very hard to get through and mostly failed. Leather straps wrapped around the back of the calves, dry and cracked like old snakeskin. He eased them off the corpse. One strap disintegrated as he touched it, snapping apart in a quiet exhale of dust. "Love that," he muttered. "So reassuring." He slid the greaves over his own shins. The metal felt like putting his legs into cold coffins. He cinched the surviving straps as tight as they'd go, and, for the broken one, tore a strip from the dead man's ruined sleeve and tied a knot. As he straightened, something rattled inside the left greave and tumbled out. A small off-white shape bounced off his foot and settled in the dirt. A tooth. Rodney stared at it. "We're not unpacking that," he decided quickly, stepping over it. The last corpse wore gloves. No, gauntlets. They were almost nice. Padded leather braces with metal plates sewn onto the backs of the hands and along the fingers. The knuckle plates were thick and scuffed, one of them marked by a thin hairline crack running straight down the middle like somebody had punched a wall, and the wall had almost won. Rodney pried them off, trying not to think too hard about the grey sludge still occupying the fingers. The old gloves peeled away with a soft, wet tear. He dropped them, swallowed bile, and shoved his own hands into the gauntlets instead. They were loose across the palm, tight over the fingers. When he made a fist to test them, creak. The leather at the wrist strained. A few threads popped. "Yeah, that tracks," he sighed. Whoever had these last tried to punch something they absolutely should not have. He flexed again, slower. The metal shifted around his knuckles, promising a little more security if he needed to block, or punch, or cling to life by his fingernails. He stepped back and took stock. Sword, shield, Rotting chainmail, damaged greaves, janky gauntlets, borrowed boots, bent helmet. He looked like a knight built out of garbage and graveyard scrap. He should have felt epic. Instead, he just felt temporary. Every piece of gear creaked, rattled, or cracked when he moved. The shield's web of fractures, the chainmail's missing rings, the helmet that didn't sit quite straight, the greaves that spat teeth. None of this was built for him. None of this would last. It felt less like armor and more like wearing a sign that said, "Please break me." Rodney let out a shaky breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Congratulations," he told his reflection in the shield's dull surface. "You are now officially Graveyard Trash Knight, first of his name, breakable as hell." Behind him, Frank's whisper never stopped. "Lantern warm, lantern safe. Don't stray. Don't stray." Rodney glanced back at the post. The lantern burned bright and golden now, nothing like the sickly green lamps scattered elsewhere. The flame flickered slow, steady, casting a small circle of clean light in the suffocating gloom. Frank sat almost shoulder to metal with it, like a half-frozen dog hogging the only heater vent in a house. The closer Rodney looked, the more he realized something unnerving. The fog refused to cross the light's boundary. It lapped at the edge of the glow like a tide that couldn't quite come in. Sanctuary. Or a lure. He wasn't sure which thought bothered him more. "Hey," he said quietly. "Frank, right?" The hollowed man didn't answer. He just rocked, eyes locked on the lantern, lips still moving. Rodney stepped closer, armor rattling softly. "Frank," he tried again. "Come on, buddy. You with me?" A beat. Frank's head twitched a fraction of an inch in his direction, though his gaze never left the flame. "Warm glow," he whispered. "Warm gods. Don't leave. Don't leave." Rodney wet his lips. "What's up ahead?" he asked. "If I follow that big light out there?" He jerked his chin vaguely in the direction he knew the holy beam was waiting, beyond the graveyard. "What's waiting for me? Is that where she is? The goddess?" Frank's rocking slowed. For a moment, the whispering stopped. When he spoke again, his voice felt thinner, strained, like words were fighting their way out past ice. "Run from the shadow," he murmured. "Run fast. Before the bell." Rodney frowned. "That's not an answer. What shadow? What bell?" Frank's fingers tightened around his own knees. "The bell," he said. "The bell calls him. Calls it. Calls them." His shoulders hunched deeper. "Don't be here when it rings." A chill crawled under Rodney's armor. "What is it?" he asked. "The big bastard stomping around out there. The one the shield guy tried to tank and lost." Frank's head tilted just enough that Rodney could see his eyes, cloudy, unfocused, but shimmering faintly with some emotion too worn out to name. "Grave Warden," Frank whispered. "He walks when the bell calls. He breaks nights. He breaks bones. His rock slowed. "He doesn't like runners." Rodney's mouth went dry. The image of the caved-in shield flashed in his mind. The spiderweb fractures creeping outward. The feel of the ground shaking when that enormous silhouette moved in the fog. "Okay," he mumbled. "So, giant undead boss dude. Probably hates me on sight. Maybe hates everyone on sight. Love that. That's great." Frank turned his gaze back to the lantern. "Don't stray," he murmured again. "Lantern warm. Lantern safe. Stay. Sit. Fade." The last word hung there like a threat wrapped in a lullaby. Rodney looked at him for a long moment. This was what staying did to you. You survived. You didn't die. You didn't move. You just wore down until nothing was left but habits and whispers and a flame you were too afraid to walk away from. His fingers flexed involuntarily inside the gauntlets. You could stay, wait here, farm weak zombies at the edges until his brain melted and his gear disintegrated. Slow death. Or he could walk that road, toward the light and the thing Frank was too broken to describe properly. Fast death. Or maybe something else. He glanced one more time at the broken bodies around the crossroads, at the cracks in his shield, at the loose rings scattered in the dirt like metal tears. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a guy who'd accidentally modded his Isekai run onto nightmare difficulty and couldn't find the settings menu. "All right," Rodney said softly. "I get it. Lantern good, giant bad, Bell very bad. But I can't just sit here and turn into a loading screen NPC." Frank did not answer. Rodney looked down the road leading away from the crossroads. The fog leaned over it like a jaw. The distant holy beam cut through the sky in that direction, a pale, unwavering spear of light. Somewhere between here and there, something big walked and listened for bells. His heart started pounding again. He adjusted the shield on his arm. The metal groaned. Another hairline fracture formed near the rim. "Don't you dare," he muttered at it. "You break on me before I even see this guy, I swear to God." The shield stayed together. For now. He took a step toward the road. Frank's whisper floated after him, thin and fraying. "It pulls you back," the hollowed man murmured. "When they run, it drags them home." Rodney stopped. He didn't turn around. "What does?" he asked quietly. Silence. Then, so soft he almost didn't hear it. "The world." Rodney closed his eyes for a second. "Yeah," he whispered. "Kinda figured." He opened them again and started walking. The lantern's glow receded behind him. The fog crept closer with every step, trying to reclaim ground it had lost. The air grew colder, heavier, tasting faintly of iron and ash. Somewhere in the distance, metal scraped stone. A slow, heavy step followed. Rodney swallowed, balanced the sword in his right hand, raised the cracked shield on his left. "Okay, big guy," he muttered under his breath, voice barely audible over the pounding of his own heart. "You broke the last team. Let's see what you do to garbage armor." He walked deeper into the graveyard, leaving the crossroads behind. The lantern's warm circle of safety vanished into the fog. And ahead, somewhere unseen, something large and patient waited on the gravewood path. Chapter 10. The Grave Warden. The graveyard finally ran out of room to be a graveyard. The narrow paths of crooked headstones widened into a broad, open court of cracked stone and half-buried coffins. The fog thinned into low coils that clung to the ground, leaving the air above unnervingly clear. Beyond it all, rising like a jagged tooth from the earth, was the temple. Up close, it wasn't a church so much as a stone fortress that had once pretended to be holy. A massive staircase climbed to a pair of towering doors, each slab of wood banded in blackened iron. Columns flanked the entrance, carved with spiraling patterns of light and flame, now chipped and weathered and stained. Statues lined the steps and the edge of the court. Angels, knights, robed figures, most of them broken at the neck or missing their heads entirely, their remaining surfaces scarred by claw marks and cracks. Rodney stopped at the edge of the clearing. Everything in him screamed that this was wrong. Too big, too silent, too much empty space for something to charge him across. The holy light he'd been following speared up from behind the temple, a white gold column stabbing the sky. It should have felt comforting. It didn't. "Yeah," he muttered under his breath. "This is absolutely a boss arena." His voice went nowhere. It just dropped into the cold air and died. In the center of the courtyard, Slumped across a fallen column, sat a knight. At first, Rodney thought it was a statue. The armor was ancient and heavy, layered plates of metal pitted with rust and green corrosion. The figure sat with its head bowed, both hands resting on the pommel of a greatsword that was driven point first into the stone between its feet. A shield leaned against the column beside it, big enough to cover Rodney completely if he tucked up behind it. No breath, no movement, no sound. Rodney swallowed and tightened his grip on his own sword. The chainmail dug coldly into his shoulders as he shifted. His scavenged shield hung heavy on his arm, its cratered metal cold against his skin. The skullcap helm felt slightly too tight, pressing a thin line of headache across his forehead. He took one step into the courtyard. A bell tolled, low and deep and close, like it was vibrating up from the bones of the earth itself. It resonated in the stone, in his armor, in his ribs. The sound rolled across the clearing and up the temple's face, then faded into a ringing hush. The knight moved. Dust cascaded from its armor in a fine curtain as its helmet lifted. The visor was just a narrow slit, black as a grave, until two green lights flared to life behind it. Not warm, not holy, sickly, wrong. Rodney froze. Oh, that's not great. The knight rose in one continuous motion, as if all its joints had been welded together and suddenly decided to work again. It pulled the greatsword from the stone with a slow, grinding scrape that set Rodney's teeth on edge, then took up the shield in its other hand. The size of it made Rodney's stomach drop. Up close, it was monstrous. The knight stepped off the fallen column and began to walk toward him. No battle cry, no roar, just the heavy, measured thunk of steel sabatons on cracked stone. Rodney forced himself to move. He lifted his shield, feeling the drag of its weight, adjusting his grip until the handle settled into the calloused groove of his palm. His lungs felt too small. His heart wanted to punch through his ribs. "You fought zombies," he whispered to himself. "You can fight one overgrown tin can. Just don't get hit." The knight closed the distance. It raised its greatsword in both hands, blade angling overhead, and brought it down in a brutal, vertical chop. Rodney dove sideways. The sword crashed into the stone where he'd been standing a heartbeat before, shards of rock exploding outward. The impact shook the ground under his boots. Okay, so not getting hit was now priority 1, 2, and 3. Rodney came up from his roll, gritting his teeth against the ache in his shoulder, and stepped in fast, slashing at the knight's side. The blade bit, but shallow, just enough to gouge a line in the armor. No give beneath, no satisfying crunch of flesh. The knight turned its head slightly toward him, as if acknowledging a mosquito. Then it ripped its sword free and swung. The horizontal cut came low and wide, aiming to bisect him at the waist. Rodney brought his shield up by reflex. Shh! The blow hit like a car crash. Metal slammed into metal with a deafening wham, the force ripping through his arm and into his spine. Rodney felt the shock all the way down into his heels. His shield arm went numb from fingertips to shoulder as the impact flung him backward. He skidded across the stone on his back, shield scraping, chainmail ringing. His vision blurred. For a few seconds he could hear nothing but the high, steady whine in his ears. "Okay," he gasped to himself when the world finally snapped back in. "Can't block that. No more of that. Ever." The knight did not rush him. It simply pivoted, slow and inexorable, to face him again. Rodney pushed to his feet, legs shaking. He circled warily, testing his weight, the shield dragging his arm down more than before. His grip on the longsword felt slick with sweat. The knight advanced, each step a statement. "I will walk you down." It didn't have to hurry. It moved like something that had never once needed to. It drew its sword up for another downward strike. Rodney moved before it fell. He darted to the knight's left, outside the arc of motion, and slashed at the back of its knee. The blade scraped across the joint where the plates met and sparked. The knight's leg buckled for a fraction of a second. It was the barest stumble, but it was there. Rodney's chest flickered with hope. "Yeah," he panted. "Yeah, that's right. You're slow. You're big. You're not invincible." The knight recovered, sword rising for another swing. This time, Rodney stepped in instead of away. He jammed his shield up under the knight's hands, knocking the angle of the cut off just enough that the sword glanced rather than connected cleanly. The blade shrieked across his shield and bit into the stone at his feet instead. Being this close to it was like standing next to a refrigerator full of bad decisions. Massive, impersonal, unconcerned. Rodney drove his shoulder into the knight's shield, more to make space than to push it back, then skipped away before it could retaliate. He didn't escape clean. The knight's shield jerked forward as if on instinct, the heavy edge clipping the side of Rodney's head. Crack. The world lurched sideways. The rim of the skullcap helm dug into his scalp as it took the brunt of the blow. The strap snapped. The metal split. The helm spun off his head and clattered across the court, bouncing twice before rolling to a stop. White pain flared hot above his ear. Rodney staggered, feeling warmth trickle down the side of his face. Shit. The knight turned fully toward him again, wholly unbothered. Rodney wiped his hand on his chainmail, forcing a bitter laugh. "Okay, helm's gone, cool. Who needs a skull, right?" He adjusted his stance. No more blocking with his face. Learned that lesson. He watched the knight's shoulders, the set of its hips, the way its grip adjusted on the hilt. Slowly, gradually, a pattern began to emerge. High swing, shoulders tense. Low sweep, sword angle drops slightly first. Shield bash, steps in with the lead foot, weight forward. He could see it. He could read it. His body was catching up to what his brain knew from hours of watching boss fights on a screen. The next overhead slash came. He was already moving, sliding to the side as the blade hammered into stone again. He chopped at the elbow joint and rewarded himself with another dent. The knight sidestepped into a sweeping cut aimed at his legs. He hopped over the low edge and countered with a quick jab at the exposed armpit gap. Shallow again, but enough to leave a mark. "Your new one with patterns," he hissed through his teeth. They traded space and steel. He circled wide. The knight tracked him like a turret. He feinted left. The sword turned with him, but not quite fast enough. He gained inches. Tiny, hard-earned inches. Each time the knight struck, the blows grew fractionally shorter, the recovery fractionally slower. Not much, just enough that someone looking for it could notice. Rodney noticed. He was bleeding from the scalp, his shield arm still half dead, his breath coming harder. But he was learning. That mattered. He was learning how not to die. He lunged in too soon. The knight's shield shot forward faster than he expected, slamming into his chest like a battering ram. The breath exploded out of him in a hoarse wheeze. He flew backward, landing hard on his arse, stars bursting behind his eyes. For a second, the roar of his own pulse drowned everything. He forced himself onto a knee, coughing. The knight approached with that same relentless, heavy pace. "Okay," Rodney croaked. "Too cocky. My bad. Won't do it again." That was when the second bell tolled. The sound rolled through the court like thunder trapped under stone. The knight halted mid-stride. The sword hung half-raised. One foot remained in the air. Everything stopped. Fog stilled. The leaves in the twisted trees beyond the cemetery didn't move. Even the air felt like it congealed. Rodney's own motion slowed without meaning to, like his body wasn't quite sure if time was supposed to be working. He stared at the knight. It didn't move. Not a twitch. Not a breath. The green eyes behind the visor stayed lit, but they were fixed past him now, on some invisible point. Rodney pushed to his feet with a grunt, keeping the longsword between them. His lungs burned, sucking in cold air. Hello? He waved the tip of his blade vaguely. You crashed? You bugged out? Tutorial over? Nothing. He took a step closer. Every instinct screamed at him not to. Every horror movie he'd ever watched hoisted up a big neon sign saying, "Do not touch the statue." He did it anyway. He poked the knight's breastplate with his sword tip. The clang echoed around the clearing, bounced off the mausoleum face, and came back to him a half-second later. The knight remained frozen mid-motion, a painting of violence that hadn't finished yet. The quiet that followed felt too big. It pressed on his ears, on his eyes, on the back of his skull. "This is either very good," Rodney whispered, "or very, very bad." The third bell tolled. The sound didn't just ring this time. It hit. It slammed through the stones, up his legs, into his chest. His teeth rattled. The longsword hummed in his grip. The knight jerked, not smoothly, not like before. It convulsed, full-body spasms that rattled its armor in a discordant clatter. Its raised foot slammed down as if its joints forgot how to function. The sword dropped point first to the ground, metal screeching along stone. Rodney staggered back, gut dropping. This is the bad one. The knight arched backward. The armor along its spine bulged. Plates strained and groaned. Rust flaked off in a shower. A sharp crack split the backplate, then another, until the metal peeled apart like rotting bark. Something underneath pushed through. Bone. Too much of it. White shapes burst from the gap, ribs lengthened and twisted into jagged protrusions, vertebrae stretching as a segmented tail forced its way free. The appendage uncoiled and lashed against the ground with a whip crack, gouging a trench in the stone. Green light bled out from every joint. The knight's gauntlets clenched and caved inward as claws, long and curved and yellowed, pushed through the steel. Fingers elongated, armor splitting and sloughing off in chunks. The helmet warped. The visor buckled outward as if something inside were pressing against it. Cracks fissured across its surface. A line split down the center, then forced open wider and wider. A maw yawned where a face should have been. Teeth, jagged and crooked, glistened in the glow. A skull that wasn't human pushed forward, fused with scraps of helm and bone. Empty sockets lit with hungry green fire fixed on Rodney and saw him. Rodney stumbled back, sword raised without knowing when he'd moved. "Oh, that's bullshit," he breathed. The thing that had been a knight tore the rest of itself free of the armor and stood to its full height. The old plate hung off it in places, reduced to decorative chunks rattling on protruding bone. Its limbs were too long, its spine arched and ridged with spurs of bone that pulsed faintly with green light. The tail lashed restlessly, the hooked tip leaving cracks and holes wherever it struck. For a split second, both of them were still. Then the grave warden charged. It crossed the distance in a blur of bone and shadow. Rodney threw himself sideways on instinct alone. Claws as big as his forearm slammed into the ground where he had been, shredding stone into gravel. The shockwave of the impact tossed him mid-roll, turning a practiced dive into an ugly sprawl. He came up on his knees, heart in his throat. The creature pivoted with a scraping screech of bone against earth, tail whipping in a quick, low arc. He barely saw it. He only felt his survival instincts shove him flat. The tail swept over him, close enough that he felt the wind of it on his back. Gravestones behind him exploded. "Keep moving," he gasped to himself as he rolled to his feet. "Move or die. Move or—" The grave warden lunged again, claws raking through a broken statue that had tried and failed to be in the way. Stone shrapnel peppered Rodney's side. He flinched, raising his shield too late to matter. No pattern yet. Too fast. Too wild. He backed away, bringing his sword up, trying to keep just out of reach. The creature stalked instead of charging this time, prowling in an arc that mirrored his own movement. It had the knight's patience, and none of its restraint. It feinted with one claw and came in with the other. He dodged left. The second swipe sliced air where his neck had just been. He dove in close, slashing at its thigh. The blade bit in this time. Real flesh, real resistance. Greenish ichor leaked from the cut. The Grave Warden recoiled with a guttural, wet growl. Rodney jumped back out of range, adrenaline flaring. "Yeah? That's right. You can bleed." The monster answered by swinging its sword. Rodney hadn't even realized it still held the greatsword in one hand. The massive blade swept in a rough arc, less controlled than before but no less deadly. He dropped to a knee as it screamed overhead. The edge clipped his shield, tearing another crack wider along its rim. His arm jolted. He grit his teeth and forced the shield back up. The creature's attention shifted. He saw it now, the way its spine stiffened just a little before the tail lashed, the brief coil of its shoulders before a leap. Not much, but enough. The Grave Warden pounced. He dove forward, rolling under it, feeling the rush of its body above him like a train. It hit the ground behind him and turned with a snarl. He slashed backward blindly and felt the satisfying resistance of his blade digging into one of its lower ribs. The sword scraped bone and tore free. The Grave Warden howled, whirling around into a wild claw swipe. He ducked under it, stumbling sideways, shield scraping across the ground. "Learn faster," he panted. Come on, learn faster." They clashed again. Slash, step, dodge, claw, block, retreat. Overhead sword, roll. Tail sweep, jump. Each exchange took a little more out of him. His lungs burned. His legs felt heavier with every forced lunge and roll. The chainmail began to pinch and scrape as sweat soaked the padding underneath. His scalp throbbed from the earlier blow, blood occasionally running down the side of his face to sting his eye. He landed another good hit, this time carving into the beast's arm just below the elbow. It snarled and slammed its tail into the ground in frustration, spraying dirt and rock. "You don't like that?" Rodney rasped. "Guess what? Neither do I." For a while, impossibly, he kept up. He wove through blows by inches, his body reacting just ahead of his brain, guided by a lifetime of dodging imaginary attacks on a screen, and the raw, ugly instinct to not die screaming under a giant bone monster. Every success, though, came a fraction slower than the last. His dodges turned from clean sidesteps into longer, heavier rolls. He started to misjudge distance, just a little. Just enough that a claw brushed his chest instead of missing entirely, tearing a shallow furrow through chainmail and skin. Enough that the edge of the greatsword kissed his hip, leaving a burning line that made his right leg hitch for 3 limping steps. The Grave Warden noticed. It slowed. It stopped barreling at him non-stop and began to stalk again, circling with its head tilted, eyes burning, tail twitching in small, eager movements. Rodney's breath came high and fast in his chest. "Stay calm," he whispered to himself. "Don't freak out. You're still in this. You just need one more opening. One good one." His hands trembled on the sword hilt. He could feel it then, a pressure at the edges of his mind. The awareness of how big this thing was, how strong, how easy it would be to die here. That he already had died once tonight. That there might not be enough lantern fire to keep stitching him back together forever. He saw the crushed shield he'd looted in his mind's eye, the caved-in chainmail, the claw-gouged sword. He could picture the bodies that had worn them crumpled beneath this thing, broken and useless. He saw himself there too clearly. His throat closed. A small, pathetic sound escaped him. The Grave Warden stopped. Its head snapped toward him, like a wolf hearing a rabbit squeak. It inhaled slowly, deeply. Then it smiled, or something close. Green light flared along its spine. Rodney's heartbeat spiked, rattling his ribs. He took one step back, boots scraping. The move wasn't tactical. It was unconscious, instinctual. "No," he whispered. "Don't do this. Don't you?" The creature blurred. One moment it was 10 paces away. The next, its claws were slamming into his shield with a sound like a bomb going off. The cratered metal couldn't take it. The shield exploded under the blow, ripped from his arm and torn into jagged, useless scraps. Shards of steel and wood spun through the air. The force sent Rodney flying backward. He hit the ground hard enough to knock the wind from him. He wheezed, rolled, tried to scramble upright. The grave warden didn't give him room. It was on him again in an instant, claws scoring the stone beside his leg. He jerked his foot away too late. A jagged edge bit into his calf, tearing flesh and leather. He yelled, half in pain, half in shock. That yell broke something loose in him. His breaths turned from forced, steady pulls into ragged, panicked gasps. His hands shook so badly he nearly dropped the sword. The world narrowed to a tunnel with the monster at one end of it and the certainty of his own death at the other. The grave warden's tail whipped low. He tried to jump. His timing was off. The hooked tip caught the lower edge of his greave and wrenched. Metal screamed as the plate bent inward, biting into his shin. He stumbled, one knee hitting the ground. The creature loomed over him, shadow swallowing him almost completely. "Please," he choked, not sure who he was begging. "Please, I don't want to." The monster reached for him. He slashed upward in blind desperation, the sword cutting a shallow line across its palm. It didn't even flinch. Its other hand closed around his torso, claws digging in. And the bell rings.
Wasn't that interesting? Now don't forget to subscribe for more.
And ring the bell for your server.